Hey everybody, Paul from Apex Fitness Plus here. In today's coaching conversation, we're going to talk to you all about running. With lack of access to gyms at the moment, many of us are dusting off our old trainers and starting to pound the streets again. With that in mind, our coaches will be discussing why running has become so popular, whether running is the best way for you to improve your fitness, and their top tips to help you stay injury free and actually find running an enjoyable experience over the next few weeks. Remember, if you like this video, please slap a like on it, click the subscribe button, and check out all the links in the description box below.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Coaches Conversations. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about running as we've kind of got into, especially the beginning of lockdown. As we get deeper into lockdown, there's plenty of people picking up running, and it's become a pretty common theme. So we just wanted to have some discussions about it, especially because we've had a lot of people coming to us with issues coming on the back end of it, but also asking how they should potentially get into running if they want to do that. So we thought we'd kind of answer some of those questions for you guys. So being joined by Andy and Milo, I want to bring you guys in a little bit. Like, what have you been seeing so far with running, kind of just around about? Milo, if we start with you.
Well, yeah, as you said, I've definitely seen like a big increase in people running. I'm there sitting having my breakfast and I'm seeing, before I'd see no one running past, and now I'm seeing 10, 20 people run past in the morning. That definitely weren't running before. And I think, first of all, I think it's great that people are wanting to exercise. But it does also worry me on the other hand, because running as a movement is actually quite difficult. And you see people running with not the best technique. And I think, if this is repeated, it's potentially going to ingrain imbalances in some body, which might be okay now, but in months and in years, it's potentially going to cause injury and problems.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I work with this a lot of clients on my own. Like it is 100% a skill, and people tend not to recognize it as that, just because it's free, it's accessible, and you just need some shoes and you can walk outside and do it. So why wouldn't everyone do it? But even that, if you've never done it before, you can see how that's going to start to pick up. And if, in the same way that if someone starts doing the bench press on their own with the wrong technique and they build that after a couple of years, it could lead to something nasty down the road. I think that makes sense. What are you seeing, Andy?
Very much the same. I think you guys have really nailed it in the point that, it is a skill, and it is a skill that you have to learn. And I think also, unlike perhaps some other forms of training, people do think, we have this innate ability to run, so I should just be able to step outside and start running. And maybe it doesn't hammer you in the same way that, doing squats does or doing bench press does. And so I think what people tend to do as well is they think, I'm going to start running, and they start running 4 days a week or 5 days a week. And that, if you want to talk about a fast way to an injury and a fast way to solidify kind of poor technique and not the right kind of movement pattern, there you go. Just go do it a whole bunch in the wrong way. So I think that's something, I'm sure we'll touch on it more, is just this idea of going out for a run and being able to run, but very, very slowly and incrementally learning that skill the right way. So
yeah, 100%. I think we'll definitely get into that a little bit more of how to build up and implement it into running, which I think is going to be such an important part in that. Before we get into that, do you give me an idea of how you guys see, like, essentially, is it a useful tool? Do we think running has merit? Like, what are the pros of it? Milo?
Yeah, I definitely think it is a useful tool, but I think it's when it's applied correctly. And I think going into what Andy just said there, a lot of people aren't applying running correctly. In the sense that they're potentially gone from running 0 times a week to now 5 times a week, and that's leading to its problems. But if it's done correctly and starting off as maybe running once a week, the week after 2 times a week, and just building gradually, it can definitely have some positives in your life, if it's applied in the right way.
Yeah, so we're saying it's a useful tool, but it just depends on who you are, basically.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and if you're in a position where you can adapt to it appropriately.
Yeah, I think it's, you've got to, are you strong enough to run? And I think it goes back to, there's a perception of that everybody can run because it is free, but does that mean you should be running? Does that make sense? Yeah.
I mean, we put together a download which will speak a bit more about this, and it's there's some assessments that we kind of use that we've always done for people trying to get into running, just for that exact purpose of seeing, are you actually strong enough? And one that I've always used is hopping. Like, can you hop for 20 to 50 meters? Like, if you can't do that and you're trying to run 5K, like, we have to consider what, running is essentially a single leg sport where we're jumping from one side to the other. We're essentially hopping. If you can't even do that on one leg for a short distance, then we definitely don't have the strength to participate in activity. So I think, that makes perfect sense. Have you got anything to add to that, Andy?
No, actually, and I really like what you just said about the assessment. That's not one that I myself have used, but I think that's a great kind of test to kind of see, because when you think about what running really is and where a lot of people pick up injuries, Achilles and that kind of stuff, and doing, hopping, and I think that's really, really good. In terms of a tool, I think, not to get too OPEX about it, but it depends, right? If it can be a great tool. And I think not just physically. I mean, I know lots of people who really, running is really tied big time into their mental health and their sense of well-being, because they can just go outside on a sunny day, get some sunshine, go out and just breathe and move, and they feel really good afterwards. So I think if applied in the right way, it can be a really good tool. But again, we have to recognize that, like Milo said, just because maybe you can doesn't mean you should, because there are other modalities and other things that can provide the same thing as running that perhaps aren't going to be as stressful to the body. But it certainly can be a good tool if applied correctly.
Yeah, great. So with that in mind, I've got feedback from someone. We're all good. So with that in mind, let's kind of go into a few ideas of how would be a great way to start running safely. So Milo, can you start us off? I know we've mentioned a few, but kind of let's go through some checkpoints of basically how we're going to implement this.
Well, I think it's, initially, I think start off the step before running. Can you walk for an hour non-stop briskly? If you can do that, you can maybe think about running. And again, just because you can walk for an hour, does that mean you can run for an hour? No. I think, you've got to build, like Danny was talking and Andy were talking about with a bench press or anything in the gym. You don't start at the heaviest weight straight away. You start at the start. And the start for you might be 5 minutes of running, walk 3 minutes, 5 minutes of running, and that twice a week. And then the following week, it might look, again, twice a week, 7 minutes of running, 3 minutes rest, 7 minutes of running, and just building up gradually. And I know that seems quite slow in the progression, but to go from 0 to 100, i.e. 5 times a week, 40 minutes running, is quite stressful on the body. And I don't know about you, but a lot of us can't take that amount of stress in one go, unless you are very comprehensively used to running beforehand. If you were running 5 times a week before lockdown, you can probably still run 5 times a week during lockdown. But bearing in mind, lockdown is a little bit more of a stressful situation. So you might want to lower the actual volume that you're doing.
Yeah, fair point. So almost building kind of time and distance and even intensity of running, just like we would reps, weight and volume in the gym. Being incremental, recognizing, I would say, like, start from where you are, not where you want to be, basically. Yeah, cool. Andy?
I mean, very well covered, both of you. I mean, I think that's really the thing, isn't it? I mean, start very slowly, incrementally, and there's nothing wrong. In fact, I would almost recommend, like with anything, with things like running and in the gym, there's not really a place for ego. So if that means that, if you start a little bit under of where you are, that's a positive thing, I would say. So, if there's any question in your mind, start with something is very achievable and just slowly build it from there. And I think that's how you're going to find success in the long term, and you're going to stay healthy, which at the end of the day, that's what we are, right? We're in the business of health and longevity. So you guys covered it. I mean, just start really, really lower down on the totem pole, achievable, make sure that it's something you can do, and really slowly over weeks and months progress it from there, not over days.
Yeah, great. Do you have any other kind of points or strategies that you think would be a good idea to keep in mind as we kind of start into running safely?
Any other ideas? I mean, well, I mean, I would just, like I said, basics, and like Milo touched on, like twice a week is a great place to start. Go pick a time domain that is very realistic and perhaps undershoots what maybe you could hit. Pick a time domain and just go for a light jog for that time, and then stop and rest and walk. And then when you feel good again, you know, jog again, and just twice a week, and just slowly build up your time that way. And then, you know, there's always the other conversations to have of, you know, make sure you've got some reasonable running shoes, you know, make sure you've got the right stuff in that sense. I mean, you know, don't go running in flip-flops, for God's sake, you know. I mean, nobody would, but you'd be surprised. So, you know, just make sure you've got a good pair of shoes. And if you're going to start running, I mean, you know, it is stressful on the body. So nutrition and eating healthfully and good sleep and all those recovery and lifestyle practices that we constantly talk about. I mean, if you're starting a new modality, something like running, those things are even more important in the beginning for you to kind of make sure you're recovering and to keep you protected from injury. So, yeah.
I think those are two great points on that. Of essentially, number one, have the right kit. We were speaking a little bit before about, like, you can tell when someone's not in the right gear when they're wearing heavy clothing, high friction stuff, you know. And again, the right shoes. Are they comfortable? Are they something that you can take a lot of impact through? Are they something that you are going to feel comfortable putting a lot of friction and load through? But then also, you made the other point of, like, let's prioritize recovery. Let's make sure that we, you know, the volume that we are accumulating, if we are choosing to do that in running, we're also going out and getting some blood flow and walks and making sure that the musculature can actually recover. And, you know, we're taking care of things like sleep and nutrition. That's going to be really important for that. I think the other thing, you know, so we've so far covered three. So I think comfortable shoes, recovery, building volume. I think another one that we've kind of touched on, but I want to give a little bit more on, is that running as a skill. I think we can be mindful when we're practicing that. Like, even if, you know, like Milo said, if you're going out for these shorter periods of time, focusing on gait, what the stride feels like, where we're landing on the foot, and actually going at time frames where you can focus on keeping it springy and feeling good and like we're propelling ourselves, rather than just, if you've got that like slapping the heel on the ground and everything shaking from left to right, like we've completely lost form of what it started out as. We can choose kind of time frames that push out that technique. I always, for people who we're trying to build running technique, I'll always start on with something like a minute on, minute off, purely because I know they can probably maintain decent form for a minute, recover for a minute if they're just doing a walk or something, back in, and we know that technique's always really good. Do you guys have any tools that you kind of like to use to help focus on someone's skill of running?
Yeah, I think, you know, one thing that you mentioned there is, if you look at all the best runners in the world, they seem like they're bouncing off the ground. You know, the actual contact time with their foot on the ground isn't that long. And I think it's you know, with some people, with the people that I have that are keen runners, it's kind of like building up a time frame where you still feel springy. So that's why, you know, we're working in shorter intervals where we, you know, as you said, 1 minute on, 1 minute off. And, you know, if you're a little bit more advanced than that, it's about doing, you know, 5 minutes of really springy, like really technically astute running, followed by 5 minutes of walking, you know, and just building that over time, because, you know, the better your form is, you know, the less injuries you're probably going to get, and the more results you're going to get on the other end.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. All right, so far, let's just summarize that. And again, below this video or somewhere, wherever this is for you, there should be a link to what will be our download, which will have more kind of an action and layout if you want to have something specific to follow, because we know that having kind of almost a checklist of these things can make it so helpful. But I think things that we're all agreeing on here today is take running as a skill, progress it like you would any other skill. Have some kit that's appropriate. Make sure that your shoes are actually comfortable. Don't go running out in clogs. It's not going to work. Build time and distance like you would reps, weight and volume in the gym. You know, be progressive. Start where you are, or even just a little bit less than where you are, rather than where you want to be. And finally, prioritize recovery. Remember, it has to be taken in consideration of whether or not we're getting enough sleep, getting enough decent blood flow and recovery for the body, and whether we're getting good nourishment and nutrition to actually fuel the body. I think those are some great walkaway points from that. Have you guys got anything to add that you think is pertinent, or do you think we've kind of covered it?
Yeah, I've got something I want to add. I think, like running's all very important. I think I mentioned it earlier that, we need to be strong to run. And I think it's important to know that, like, professional runners, they don't just run, they have strength training as well. And I think it's important, if you are running, you should be doing some sort of resistance training, whether this is split squats, reverse lunges, bodyweight lunges, calf raises, anything which kind of strengthens your legs and your core, done at like a nice slow tempo, because this is going to build strength and actually enhance your ability to run in the long run.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like, especially for those who are more into running and have been into running for a little while, it's something that I've worked with a lot of very good runners, and they tend to have initially come to me with the idea that weights will make them heavy and therefore bad runners. Or they get the idea of, like, they suddenly start doing some weight work and suddenly they're massive guys or girls, and they can no longer run because they're kind of Arnold Schwarzenegger-esque. And actually, like, without going into the boring stuff, that we know not only does it make us a little bit more resilient because we increase the body's ability to be variable in positions, but also we end up better coordinating muscles that make us more efficient runners, don't we? Exactly like you said, we are more strong and we can create more of that spring, but at the same time, we let our body understand the difference between the endurance fibers and the explosive fibers. So we end up recruiting things more efficiently. So I think that's a great point, both for the novice, but also for someone who's been in running a little bit longer and needs a way to kind of balance out their program a little bit. Great addition, Milo. Anything from you, Andy?
No, I think that really covers it. I think that was a really great point, a really pertinent point. I guess I was thinking earlier, that something when I first started getting into running, years ago with the military, it's just a really simple point. It's just something that I found made a difference. Is when I was starting to run, for some reason, I would be quite tight. And I would be the kind of, like, people are, you see a lot of people, they run with like a tight upper body and everything's tight and it expends energy and it just creates tension all over the body. And I think, I'm not the best guy to speak to when it comes to running mechanics, but I think something to do is, relax into it. The body should, you should be relaxed when you're going for a run. This should not be something where you're super stressed and uptight and thinking, okay, I'm going to run now. This is relax into it. Relax and let the body do what it wants to do and build it up slowly. I think that's, from a technical standpoint, that's about as far as I can really add, but that's what I think.
Great point. Like, find that efficiency. Like anything we're doing for a long period of time, if we're not efficient, then we're just leaving energy on the table, essentially, aren't we? Yeah. So, no, great point. Great. I think we'll wrap it up there, guys. I think that's a huge amount of information to get into. And like I say below, there will be a link to our kind of guide to start running during lockdown. If you want to find out more information in there, we've got things like assessments we use, kind of whether you are or not at this point ready to start running. And if not, maybe what you should start off with. And also a brief guide of basically what we recommend as a kind of a beginner program to both take care of things like skill adaptation and working on the skill of running, but also endurance. So definitely check that out. I hope you've enjoyed this talk and I hope you enjoy other talks. Like we always say, like, comment, share, subscribe. We really direct the direction of the content that we provide based on what you guys are finding useful. We want to provide value in that. So yeah, guys, thanks for joining me and we'll speak soon.